The Planning Portal Planning Market Insight Report: The Impact of COVID-19 on Planning Application Submission. As the home of the National Planning Application Service, the Planning Portal has worked in partnership with every local authority across England and Wales to transform the process of planning and building control application submission. Focusing on delivering a quality service to all applicants and professional agents, we have seen the growth in the take-up of online submission, and now 90% of all planning applications are submitted online using the Planning Portal. The placement of the Planning Portal in the development industry puts us in a unique position to offer valuable insight into proposed development data by helping businesses identify opportunities and trends, inform future strategies, business planning, and thought leadership. In May this year, we launched our Planning Market Insight Report. This coincided with the global coronavirus pandemic, or COVID-19 as it's widely known. This has been an anxious time for everybody, from both a personal and professional perspective, as applicants have needed to evaluate the impact on them, their families and finances, and equally important, their jobs and job security, and ultimately whether to proceed with the submission of their application. With this in mind, the early editions of the reports have had a key focus on tracking and monitoring the impact on planning application submission since lockdown began in late March. Since lockdown started on the 23rd of March until today, the 6th of August, it's been 136 days, or just over 4 months, where citizens and businesses have faced major operational issues as we tackle this crisis. Construction has long been a central tenet of government's economic growth strategy, but this was brought to a halt by the national lockdown. In the planning arena specifically, many businesses furloughed staff and some found creative solutions to manage work remotely. Equally, local authorities have faced tough issues too, with some diverting staff to frontline services to support their citizens and communities that have reduced resource in planning and building control departments across the country. In early May, we saw construction sites start to reopen, but with new social distancing measures in place to protect the safety of the workforce. Since our first edition in May, we have been sharing what all of this has meant for the nature and volume of planning applications submitted during these unprecedented times, looking at the national impact and how this relates to each region across England. To add a little context to this, each year there are over 500,000 planning applications submitted to local authorities in England and Wales, from smaller householder projects to major residential developments, commercial business and retail parks, through to industrial distribution centres. Throughout the last 4 months, we have been watching the impact of COVID-19 closely and reported that application volumes were down 18.5% in April, 14% in May when compared to 2019. However, June's figures revealed an astonishing 21% increase on the previous year, and July submissions have continued in the same vein with an upward trend. Looking specifically in June, this realised a 31% increase from May 2020 and represents the second highest number of planning applications ever submitted in a month since the Planning Portal's first launch. The data shows the earlier positive signs of recovery in May have continued through June, providing a good indicator that applicants have sufficient confidence in the economic market to continue with their proposals. It would also indicate that many proposals during late March, April and May were put into abeyance and are now starting to proceed once more. A key deciding factor in whether to proceed or to postpone applications is the financial situation of the individual applicant or business. The last 4 months have undoubtedly provided time to evaluate proposals and consider if finance for home improvement remains secure, or in the case of businesses, whether the business case still stacks up. July is on a similar trajectory to June, but it's still too early to predict what will happen in the coming months. It remains to be seen what the future may look like across many business sectors and how each sector may have different recovery strategies. It is, however, going to be a long and gradual process over the coming 18 months that you can monitor via our Planning Market Insight Report. Each month in the report, we also look at how the national submission figures relate to each region to see the complete breakdown and note any trends. As you can see from the slide, it's useful to see that for the first time since March, the volume of planning applications has risen across all regions by around a third. It's also interesting to analyse and see that Yorkshire and Humber was one of the strongest areas for growth in May, with a 12% month-on-month increase, and this has continued into June with a 33% increase on May figures. Other regions with a slightly above average growth month on month include the North West and the East and West Midlands for the same period. Our historic data shows us that in normal circumstances, we can expect application volumes to vary each month, but they do tend to follow a similar pattern each year. Analysing the percentage variation in each month as compared to the previous year gives us a strong indication on the variation regionally from the seasonal norm. Applications are now above the expected seasonal average in all areas, with some receiving 30% more applications in June 20 than in June 19. This could indicate those applications that were held back are now coming through. Each month, the report contains information on each application by type and shows a comparison against historic data to highlight trends for analysis. Looking back at the data for March and the beginning of lockdown, we can see in some cases there is a consistency in the pattern of application types performing above and below seasonal averages. Householder and full planning applications constitute the vast majority of planning applications submitted. As such, the impact on these two application types is particularly important to watch. They also represent two different areas of the construction sector and enable us to compare the relative confidence in these areas. Although they are not mutually exclusive, an uplift in householder applications will tend to suggest a returning consumer confidence, as individuals feel comfortable about their longer-term job security and start spending and planning home improvements. By contrast, an uplift in full planning applications will tend to suggest growing confidence in the economy as a whole, alongside business and investment. Another application to watch during economic change is outline planning permission, which caters for many larger schemes such as residential, commercial, and industrial schemes. These are typically done at an early stage to determine whether the principle of development is acceptable and whether or not it is likely to be approved before any substantial costs are incurred. Outline permission can also be sought with all matters reserved or some matters reserved, meaning that some or all of the details are reserved for a later decision. Either way, submission of outline consents can provide a useful insight into the longer-term pipeline of development and economic health. We have also covered small features on other types of planning permission and looked specifically at works to trees and prior approval development by telecoms operators. It is useful to analyse trends as tree applications have a strong seasonal pattern to them. We can therefore see the clear impact of the lockdown and reopening in the profile of these applications over the 3 months shown. As confidence returns to business and homeowners across the country, we have seen this pattern repeated across other types of applications, albeit more gradually in most cases. Each month, we also include a featured topic in the report. In recent editions, we have presented an insight into full planning application proposals and covered separately non-residential developments and then residential developments. Both have revealed some very interesting insight on the scale, type, and location of these proposed developments. Non-residential developments cover the full range of use classes that is shortly to be amended by government and include retail, office and industrial, hotels and institution, service and other sui generis uses. It included information on both new development and change of use for existing buildings. The net additional gross internal floor space by use class category from January to May this year in square metres was broken down as per the slide and shows that 40% of proposals submitted were for office and industrial uses. In July, we chose to look at residential proposals submitted using the full planning forms and associated consent. Interestingly, the data showed that approximately 25% of all applications submitting using these forms were for residential developments. When completing the full planning form, applicants are required to provide details on residential units, including conversion, and whether proposals include the gain, loss, or change of use of residential units. We explored this in further details to capture and report the total number of existing and proposed dwellings, the number after the development is complete, and reviewed the housing categories and dwelling types. The slide shows the residential table from the application form and net gain of units by each region in 2020. By delving deeper into residential applications being applied for in the first 6 months of the year, the data shows a total net gain of 77,379 units. To gain a more comprehensive insight into the total residential submissions in 2020, we analysed the outline planning forms data to obtain a total net gain figure for these applications too. This revealed a further net gain total of around 51,000 units, and combining the two gives a grand total net gain of nearly 129,000 units in the first 6 months of 2020. As a part of this analysis, in the report we analysed the residential data captured on housing sector types, house types, number of bedrooms, and a lot more detail can be found in the July's report, and I would recommend taking a look at it. The monthly report contains lots of additional information on plan and application submission that is only available exclusively from the planning portal. This includes an in-depth look at information on planning fees, all data entered into the plan and application forms, including materials to be used, and all the document types submitted with them. We report submissions at all levels, from national, regional to local authority areas, to offer valuable insight into development data, helping businesses identify opportunities and trends, inform future strategies, business planning, and thought leadership. I'd recommend that if you do have a specific application submission data requirement for any of the above, especially around thought leadership insight or research projects that you are about to undertake, then do get in touch, as we'd love to hear from you. Along with the submission of planning and building control applications, we are always evolving our services to keep abreast of changing technology to meet the demands of our customers and maintaining an authoritative and compliant service in line with new and emerging government policy and legislation. In future webinars, we will take a look at the invalidation of planning applications, and my colleague Jonathan will focus on the topic of location and site plans shortly.
Hi everyone, for this next section, I will be discussing the validation of location site plans and how to create a compliant plan. Now, this is an area that I focus in, so rightly or wrongly, I find it very interesting, very fascinating. So hopefully, with a bit of luck, you all will find it interesting as well during the course of this session. When looking into planning applications and what makes them valid in the eyes of a local planning authority, there is a number of factors that need to be considered. Over the course of these webinars, we will delve deeper into the specifics of what is required when submitting a planning application. But for today, I would like to enter into the world of location and site block plans. Now, on site block plans, I appreciate that terminology can vary depending on who's dealing with it, but for the course and purpose of today, I will refer to them as site plans. 30% of planning applications are rejected because of invalid plans, so it is worth exploring why that is. To understand the differences between a location plan and a site plan in a bit more detail, they can be broken down in a simple way. The location plan, in essence, is highlighting where the development is going to take place, including the surrounding area and the properties around the area as well. The site plan essentially refers to identifying what the development is, so it would include such things as a proposed extension, the size and positioning of that development. It is worth noting, however, that location plans are compulsory, so all local planning authorities will require a location plan, but with site plans, it will depend on the requirements and local rules of that local planning authority that you're submitting an application into. So 50% of local planning authorities request for a location and site plan, but agents may still choose to submit one regardless. But it's just worth keeping that in mind that one may not be required, but it will just depend on what that local planning authority is looking for. There are a number of requirements involved with these plans that a planning officer will be looking for when validating applications. Let's have a look at some of the common mistakes that applicants can make and how best to avoid them. To do this, I will demonstrate creating a compliant plan by using our solution, Request a Plan, which you will also be able to find on the Planning Portal website by clicking on Buy a Planning Map. Right, so I've just moved on to our solution now. If I click on to the next part. The first common mistake I wanted to highlight was not using an Ordnance Survey map. A plan could still be passed as valid without an OS map, but all the survey provide up-to-date and clear mapping. So you run the risk of having a plan rejected if the mapping is not compliant, and OS maps will guarantee that compliancy. So again, it's looking at that subjectivity. So it can depend on that local planning authority. So a planning officer may be looking for the OS license number when reviewing a plan. If you look at the bottom right of this screen here, you will see the OS license number. This should fill you with the confidence that at the start of the journey of creating a plan, the base map is at least correct. The next common mistake I wanted to highlight was incorrect scale size plans. Quite often applicants will submit the wrong scale size plan with their application. To be compliant, you will want either a 1 to 1250 or a 1 to 2500 scale location plan, or either a 1 to 200 or 1 to 500 scale site plan. Fortunately, compliance solutions like Request a Plan will have only those options available to you, reducing, if not removing, that risk of providing the wrong scale on a plan. Another common mistake is not identifying the area correctly. As a location plan is all about enabling a planning officer to identify where the development will be, this needs to be done in as clear a possible way. For instance, it is essential that 2 road names or a road name and a recognised monument is visible on the plan. On a solution to create these plans, you will be able to place a border in the correct area to ensure criteria is met. Moving on to the next common mistake, which is quite a big one, is not including a red line boundary around the property, or instead providing a hand-drawn boundary on the plan. One of the, if not the most crucial parts of a location and site plan is displaying a red line boundary around the property or area that will be worked on. Without it, the planning committee cannot identify the location, thus making the application and plan invalid. So here, you want to simply click on the property to produce a red line boundary. This will be accepted. A hand-drawn boundary should not be accepted. Also, if an applicant was to own another property close by, then this needs to be identified via a blue line boundary, like so. I do want to keep the demonstration simple today, but if you are creating a site plan, then you would also want to potentially include such things as the development by creating or choosing a shape to put onto the plan. Or if you require various features depending on the purpose of the request for planning permission, then you can select accordingly. So it may be that you are building a development and there is a large tree canopy that's in the way, or maybe an obstruction, so you can highlight that on the plan. Now, other common mistakes that we can see is not including north arrows or a meter bar on the plan document. Local planning authorities will expect to see a north arrow and a meter bar on a plan document. Providing they are visible, then this will help with the validity of that plan. Just to show you an example of a finished location plan, so you've got the OS map as a base map. You have 2 road names, you've got the boundary around the property, Scroll down, you have the north arrow, you've got the meters bar, the information about the plan. So this, in theory, should be a valid plan that can be accepted by a local planning authority to then progress through your planning application. Similar to a site plan, showing what work is going to take place and any measurements or any detailed information that is required. So really, in summary, you need to provide a local planning authority with as much information as they need to increase the probability of the plan being valid. A tool like Request a Plan can provide that for you, produce a compliant plan, and go through a simple to use journey when doing so. This has hopefully given you an idea of what to include and what to avoid doing when creating a location and site plan to ensure it being valid. We will be taking questions afterwards, so please feel free to ask. You may even just want to share your own views and experiences on this matter. Have you, as applicants and agents, had any challenges at all when submitting these plans? I hope this has been helpful, and thank you very much for listening.